The fact is that all languages are spoken and not all languages are written. And the Arabic is no different.
Translators are like smugglers. Bad translators can be an embarrassment, and good translators turn into legends.
The problem lies in the fact that for very many children, Arabic has become a foreign language.
Thanks everybody for sticking around. When we put together this symposium, part of the idea was to explore Arabic in all its different forms. And obviously, one of the hallmarks of a language as like a technology is it existing in written form. And so we wanted to explore what Arabic looks like in sort of all of its variations in written form and specifically in published written form. So today, moderating this panel is Layan Abdul Shakoor, who is the founder and creative director of Mawzoon, the region's first creative studio that specializes in premium writing and boutique publishing, I think exclusively in Arabic. صح? Amazing. And on top of that, her most impressive achievement is that she is an alumnus of Northwestern. So it is an honor to have her. I'm going to have you introduce the rest of the panel. Is that okay?
Assalamu alaikum jami'an. The first and most important point I have to address, which we all kind of laughed about as we were prepping this panel, is the sheer irony of it being in English. And I had it on my bingo card today, or like my mental bingo card of like who would say it first. So thank you, Salma, for bringing it up. It's quite funny. The other irony is the fact that we're holding this panel in the American University in Qatar, which I graduated from, obviously, but hopefully we'll have a lovely conversation about the irony of it all and also the importance of it all. So of course today I have the lovely Dr. Enam. She is a professor of linguistics from the University of Essex, and her particular interest is in the Arabic vernacular, or the many Arabic vernaculars. And we also have the lovely Omar Thawabeh. We actually had the privilege and pleasure to work together. He is currently the head of translation, correct, at Doctors Without Borders in Beirut. And we actually translated the book together. It was Bye Bye Babylon by Lamia Ziada. So essentially on this panel today, you have an expert in publishing, myself, an expert in translation, Omar, and an expert in linguistics, Dr. Enam. And all three of us have a very strong, fiery, fervent passion for the Arabic language. So I'm sure it'll make for a very exciting panel. I am indeed the moderator of this panel, but the three of us thought that it would be interesting to kind of start with the publishing aspect and then bounce off to the linguistic aspect second, and then the translation aspect third, and kind of weave all three elements together. So something very important to start with, and I'll try not to take too long explaining it because I love this topic so much, is a brief overview on the state of publishing in the Arab world today. I'm unsure if many of you know these facts, but I'll state them, let's say, from scratch for the benefit of the panel and for the benefit of everyone. The Arab publishing scene functions rather strangely. It's the only region in the world where, for example, book fairs are predominantly B2C, business to customer, not B2B, business to business. A whopping 53% of all Arab book sales happen in book fairs. This cannot be further investigated, this along with the many other interesting facts about the Arab publishing world, cannot be investigated without first delving into the history of printing and the history of publishing in the Arab world. For example, a fun fact which we'll discuss throughout the panel today is that we know the Gutenberg press, i.e. the first innovation, let's say, of the printing press, was invented in Germany, right, around 1523. When was the first printing press in the Arab world? Any guesses? You can just kind of say it out loud. Yeah, that's true. 1801, 1807, some sources differ, right? But the predominant agreement is that it was first in Halab, in Syria, Aleppo, and then eventually it started to open in Cairo, and as we know, Al-Qahira Tatba', Cairo prints, right? Why was that? So some academics think that the printing press was only introduced rather late due to, for example, religious reservations, namely because the Gutenberg press printed You guessed it, the Gutenberg Bible. And the Ottoman Empire was kind of reluctant to have that disseminate. However, some academics also argue that a more culturally nuanced argument is the fact that the Ottoman Empire, and by extension, the Arab countries that were ruled by the Ottoman Empire, was successfully and very elaborately functioning as an oratorial society or oratorial societies. Literacy was not a standard of success. That is the truth of the time. People succeeded immensely in communicating via speech. Written text was simply not necessary, and literacy was simply not a measure of success. Later on, things changed, and then printing was deemed necessary. Therefore, this explains the, let's say, 300-year delay. Very small fact in the huge world of the Arabic vernaculars, of publishing, of printing, of Arabic literacy, of Arabic reading, that then informs what we need to investigate, let's say, throughout this panel. There's today, maybe on like a daily level, especially the Arabic speakers would know this, there's like a general lack of bookstore infrastructure in the Arab world. Why is that? What is the place of the Arabic vernacular in all these aspects of the industry? Do we need to make the space for it? Or do we need to prioritize Fusha? Why or why not? How does that reflect in translation? So now I will hand the discussion over to Dr. Enam, who will tell us about the history of the Arabic language at large.
Thank you very much for being here and for the invitation. I am a bit of an imposter here because I am sitting next to two people who understand their industry. I'm coming from a completely different corner, from the academic sphere with research interests in variation in Arabic. So what I thought might be very helpful is to present this as a starting point for how we can bring academia together with translation and business like publishing, especially seeing as publications in Arabic, academic Arabic, are only just starting at the hands of the new generation. We obviously need to put in a lot of work in that area. But let me just give a very general overview of Arabic as a living language. I mean, we have to think of Arabic as a living language. And if we think of it in the traditional terms, in the ways that lay people were taught to think about it, then it probably would be a dead language. And so if you ask just the average person, what do you think Arabic is? Arabic is written Arabic in a particular form because this is how Arabs were instructed to think of the language. In a sense, what you did earlier, Nizar, you set the stage really nicely for what I'm going to say. Every form of Arabic is Arabic, regardless of whether it is a written form of the language or simply spoken. And if we think of words, languages, so there are about 7,000 languages around the world, the vast majority of them are not written. Spoken languages have dominance also in linguistic investigation. So we don't care if a language is written or not. We try to write it, find a system of writing in order to preserve it, but that tends to be, in an effort to preserve a language, languages that are endangered. But the fact is that all languages are spoken and not all languages are written. And Arabic is no different. The vast majority of varieties of Arabic are spoken. Vernaculars, which are the native languages of absolutely all those who grow up with parents who speak a form of Arabic to them. So what is the history of this language? Again, an account, a systematic account of the history of Arabic is only just emerging, largely due to advancements in the reading of ancient inscriptions, we tend to think of Arabic as of the start of Arabic as the form of written Arabic that reached us. The Holy Quran, for instance, is one form, the ancient manuscripts, but in fact the history of Arabic goes far longer than that. We simply did not have evidence of the existence of a form of Arabic until perhaps the 1970s, something like that, when linguists who are specialized in particular in the reading of ancient scripts discovered a fairly large body of inscriptions on rocks. And they recently reached as many as 100,000 or over 100,000. They believe there are still many hundreds of thousands of such short texts that are written and were identified as a form of Arabic. So today we are in a position, following Dr. Ahmed Al-Jallad's work, to believe that this is the earliest form of written Arabic that we have. And it is dated to, roughly speaking, the 1st or the 2nd century BC. So we are talking about some 8 centuries prior to the written Arabic that we tend to think of as the beginning of Arabic. But of course, these inscriptions, this is a written form of the language, and based on what we know about human language, namely that it is spoken well before a written form is established, if ever established, then Arabic must be as a separate language and identifiably independent language from its sister and cousin languages, such as Aramaic, for instance, must have existed well before that. We know almost for sure, for instance, that one of the very well-known Arabic kingdoms, the Nabateans, that they spoke Arabic. They wrote in Aramaic, but that they spoke Arabic. So we have some points in history that give us confidence in thinking that we are talking about centuries BC. And now we have these inscriptions that for certain tell us that this is a form of Arabic. So what is this form of Arabic is the very interesting question, obviously, for us linguists. In particular, we would want to look at not only the structure of this written earliest inscription, which was inscribed in a southern script that linguists tend to think they call it Safaitic, just as a convention in relation to the area of the Safa, Bil-Harra, Bil-Badiya Suriya. And most of these, the ones that have been deciphered, were discovered in the Al-Harra Al-Urduniya, so in the northeastern steppe in Jordan. So this form of Arabic bears resemblance to Arabics that we know. So, for instance, it is extremely exciting to me as a specialist in vernacular Arabics, and especially in Levantine Arabics, that there is a lot of commonalities between this very early form of the language and the dialects that are spoken in the region. And this is an extremely important observation, because what it is telling us is that there is continuity of spoken Arabic from then on until now. But it also has commonalities with what we came to call classical Arabic, which we tended to think of as the oldest form of Arabic. And in terms of ages of language, it turns out that classical Arabic really is very young. It's like yesterday in comparison to this earliest form of Arabic. So what I wanted to say here is that Arabic, just like any other language, it has a history, and all we need is to discover this history and put the puzzle together in order to come, hopefully at the other end, to come up with a methodical way of understanding the development of Arabic and its relationship to other languages in the same family that we call conventionally Semitic languages. The second aspect of Arabic that is not different from any other living language is that it varies. There is not a language on earth, a living, natural, human language on earth that does not vary. Every single linguistic system that is used by people, by its native speaker, varies in various ways. It varies geographically, it varies also socially. And these two aspects also apply to Arabic. Arabic varies geographically, and why should it vary according to where it is spoken has something to do with the dialects that, with mobility. So if we think, for instance, of the dialects that are spoken in the western part of the Arab world, so I'm talking about North Africa, linguists have been able to account for why the dialects, the vernaculars of the Maghreb al-Arabi, why they look the way they do, starting with who were the Arabs who moved there. Because obviously, Arabic outside the East Mediterranean, northern part of the Arabian Peninsula is a newcomer everywhere. It is a newcomer. So we were able to work out at least a first layer of these dialects, the founder population, the founding fathers, if you like. It looks the way it does, partly because of the types of Arabic dialects that were carried over and transplanted in these areas. Later on, it came in contact with, at the same time, it probably also came in contact with indigenous languages of North Africa, for the most part, the Amazigh languages, or what we call Berber. It also came in contact with various other European languages at different points in history, as well as it was adopted by speakers whose mother tongues were different, and over time, the original languages that were spoken by these populations influenced the sorts of dialects that emerged in these places. We can say very much the same thing about any of the Arabic dialects that we know, the best known ones. So this also applies to the types of Arabic that is spoken in the East Mediterranean. And there we tend to find a very obvious influence of the language that used to be the mother tongue of the majority of the populations there, namely Aramaic, and so on and so forth. So this is one way of how we can work out why a certain dialect looks the way it does, but this is not enough. So this element, the original dialect, is one of the elements. Other elements have to do sometimes with geography, because topography, land topography, can influence the way dialects are stratified geographically, but also socially. So within, let's say, each the Arabic-speaking community, there are ways in which the dialect varies according sometimes to age of the speaker, according to socioeconomic class, according to dialectal background, and so on and so forth, and style. So Arabic varies exactly in the same way that other human languages vary. It varies according to region, it varies according to various social factors. So is it different? No, it isn't different. And the third aspect that Arabic shares with all natural living languages is that it changes. No language does not change. The only languages that do not change are dead languages. So Latin does not change because it is not spoken, as simple as that. Arabic changes because it is spoken. Claiming that Arabic does not change, it is tantamount to claiming that Arabic is dead. The only type of Arabic that does not change is probably the Arabic that is inscripted in books. So this leads us then to the question of what do we do with this? What do we do with this variation and the fact that the language changes systematically, most often, when we come to questions of translation and publishing. And I'll stop here, for now.
We'd love to hear more. That was very insightful, Dr. Enam. I think I'll use what Dr. Enam said to segue to you, Omar, by asking the question of what do you think of, as mentioned in the previous panel by Dr. Nizar, the gatekeepers of Fusha Arabic, of modern standard Arabic. And in our prior conversation to this panel, he also mentioned the quote-unquote vernacular panic. So we'd love to hear more about that.
It's very funny that when I was telling my mother that I'm coming here for a panel, and she asked me, "What's your topic?" And I said, "Accepting linguistic variety in published Arabic." She was like, "Oh, I don't like that." And mind you, this is someone who enjoys the cartoons of Abu Mahjoub, who loves the songs of Ziad Rahbani, and who is touched by the poetry of Salah Jahin, all of them who write or produce in vernacular. And I think Amanda said something very, very interesting when she said that sometimes we treat Arabic as an artifact. What does that mean? It means it's sure, absolutely, it's gorgeous, it's beautiful, but it's dead, it's fragile, and it doesn't belong to you. And we really need to understand that Arabic is a living language that develops as our societies develop, and we really need to be far more open in the question of accepting the presence of vernacular in print, in published Arabic. And one random example that comes to mind, where we had initiatives of translated novels that are translated in colloquial, in Arabic accents, for instance. There's one example that comes to mind, Al-Gharib for Albert Camus. And what's interesting, if you just open the first page and you compare the Egyptian version with the modern standard Arabic version, so there's a mention of a telegram. توفيت والدتك ستدفن غدا تحياتي. Then we move to the Egyptian version. الوالدة توفت الدفن بكرة البقية في حياتك. Which one do you think sounds, which one touched you? Which one do you which one conveys the feeling, to be honest, I can go on and on about this, but maybe at a later point.
Of course, I think we have a lot to ping pong together in terms of these topics. Maybe a good starting point would be to kind of bring it back to the book, since we're discussing Arabic vernacular in publishing, and maybe to state the example which I published, or Mozoon published, and Rama translated, and Dr. Enam read and praised, which I'm very happy about, which is the first Arabic translation of Lamia Ziyada's graphic novel, Bye Bye Babylon. It was a graphic novel originally written in French, published some years ago, not quite recent. And me and Omar were shocked, to be honest, that it was never translated to Arabic, because the subject matter and the content is extremely Arab. It's about the Lebanese Civil War from the eyes of the author as a child, so it's an autobiographical work. And a lot of the artwork there is very nostalgic, reminds us all of things that are familiar to us, even if we didn't live in Lebanon, but some artifacts of, let's say, supermarket candy or the shows that we watched are familiar to paint a broad stroke, most Arabs. And when we went on, let's say, the challenging journey of translating this book from French to Arabic, it was kind of like bringing the content of the book home instead of bringing it to a foreign audience, which is a very strange experience, right? Usually when you're translating a book, you're communicating the, let's say, quote-unquote, local culture of that book to international audiences. So the first question that beckons itself is, why is that the case with Arabic books? Why do we find so many Arabic works written, very captivating Arabic works, written in foreign languages that then have to be communicated to Arabic? That's food for thought. To bring the topic closer to the panel today, Omar and I had many discussions while working on the translation. And then we kind of came to this very important part of our journey. How do we write the dialogue? Because the book is translated in modern standard Arabic and Fusha, Arabi Fusha. And since, after many discussions, quite many, we decided to translate the certain dialogues into Lebanese Arabic, which, in our very biased opinions, is an excellent choice, right? Because it really brings the context of Lebanon, of the civil war there, of the character, of the autobiographical nature of the book to heart, right? And despite that, I have experience as a publisher when touring the 101 book fairs of the Arabic world, or the Arab world. Quite a few remarks of disdain, let's say, towards the vernacular or the Arabic vernacular used only in the dialogue, not in the main text of the graphic novel. And that reaction is very interesting. It's almost like a rejection of that no, this does not sound like the way I speak. This wasn't every reaction, but it's quite noticeable. The far and few in between, but still very strong reactions. So it was almost like, in Arabic we call it nafr, like this denial, this pushing away of like, no, I don't speak this, I don't want to read it. But you do hear it, you do interact with it. I mean, in every Arab society, you will find one person from Lebanon, or you'll watch a television show or a TikTok or a social media post. So you do get it, you do understand it. So why this pushing away? Why this rejection? And I would love to hear what you think, Omar, and what you think, Dr. Enam.
Okay, but if I may start with like one story that like is a continuation of what Rana said about women being at the forefront of this evolution of content in Arabic. The idea of translating by Babylon to Arabic came to me. I was visiting Lamia while she was in Beirut in the summer of 2021. Back then she had 4 books. Only one of them was translated to Arabic, and all of her books talk about the Arab world and are beautifully illustrated and are written in French in what we call in Arabic sahel mumtana kind of style. It's very beautiful, it's very simple, yet it hits a nerve. And I was asking her, why aren't your books available in Arabic? Why isn't there interest? And then at one point, I was like exchanging ideas of like possible publishers that can accept the publication of by Babylon, since it was her first novel and it was like re-released with more beautiful illustrations. And I went home that night and I was like, I dream of translating this book. And the next morning I had work and I texted Layan and I was like, listen, do you have 5 minutes? I have an idea. I'm not sure about it, but like, can we talk? She was like, yes, sure, of course. Back then, I was working for Mawzoon as a senior writer. Mawzoon was then the promising, emerging writing studio that was taking serious steps towards boutique publishing. And I told Layan about my friendship with Lamia and about the prospect of, could this become a Mawzoon project? Layan did not blink. She was like, I love the idea. We will do this. And I'm just saying this to emphasize how in this industry we really need to take courageous steps. We need to be creative, and for me it was an honor to work on this book. And also that the process of translation was a very interesting process, because I remember having a conversation with Lamia. Her first book that was translated to Arabic, Ya Lili Ayn, I remember she told me she was not happy with the translation, and sometimes she would give feedback to the translator, and the translator would tell her, no, that's not how we do it, you know? And this tells you about translators, because like they tend to flex their linguistic muscles. They think that they know better. If my character is a 7-year-old girl from Ashrafiyya, Beirut, why on earth would I let her sound like Ibn al-Muqaffa? I would betray my character, I betray the author who entrusted me with this, and I also betray my readers, you know? And this is where we came to, our decision was, this is going to be a participatory process of translation. So what happened, I was like, luckily, Lamia was spending the fall in Beirut, so I was like, listen, here's how we're going to do it. I will translate the chapter at home, I'll come to your house, I will read the chapter out loud for you, and you would give me your feedback. And because this is a book that I really loved, and this is a book that was written in beautiful French, sadly, my first flex was like, okay, this is going to be a lavender-scented book in Arabic. My phrases are going to be velvety. And I remember like reading the first few pages to Lamia, I was like too cocky about it. I was almost like reciting, very happy with like the very complex phrases that I was building, and she would go like you know. And then it hit me. This is not about me flexing my linguistic muscles. This is about telling the story in the language of its people. This is a story that took place in Beirut during the Civil War. And this brings me to the idea of what do we think of translators? You know, like there are these flowery images of, oh, translators are messengers, translators are storytellers. I think, and this might be problematic, translators are like smugglers. Bad translators can be an embarrassment, and good translators turn into legends. So, like, a bad smuggler, if they're stopped at a if a policeman stops a smuggler, what do you have in that trunk? And they say, I don't know, drugs, you know? I mean, they're caught immediately. But then the good smugglers, the legends, they pass by the checkpoint, and the policeman gives them a salute, you know? So it's about claiming the story to be yours while staying truthful to it. And Fawaz Trabulsi said something very interesting about translation being فعل مراوغة, an act of mischievous maneuver. It is, we tend to, as translators, we love our craft because we claim the story to be ours by writing it in our language.
Definitely. I would love to hear Dr. Enam's opinion about this, about the presence of the Arabic vernacular in Arabic books, whether fiction or non-fiction, and namely, how do we, let's say, with your expertise in the field of linguistics, how do we build the bridge between the people who are for propagating modern standard Arabic in books versus the people who are for propagating the vernacular Arabic in books, with the other side of the bridge, which is the fact that the publishing industry in general is rather lacking compared to international industries. Just to further define lacking for everyone in the room, so the average Arabic book sells for way less than the Korean book, than the Japanese book, than the English book, and there are many economical, industry-related reasons behind that, to name a few, right? So how do we sort of fill that gap?
Thank you. I will approach this issue from something you mentioned earlier, namely the reactions like your mother's, for instance. I mean, let's think about this. Why do Arabs disparage their mother tongues? Their mother tongues are the vernaculars. There's probably no nation on earth that disparages their mother tongue in the way that Arabs do. But why is that? Why do we get reactions like this? It's normal for people not to like language change. So when something changes, people to begin with react against it. And when it takes over and it accelerates and the new innovative form takes over. In fact, the old form becomes obsolete and people find it very strange. So this means that actually it's a matter of time. People over time do accept new things and embrace it. And of course, if they hadn't embraced it, the change wouldn't, in fact, progress and go to completion. It's a little bit similar here. So why do most people react negatively to incorporating some variation in the written form of Arabic? In my opinion, a large part of this reaction is psychological, based on fear that is presented and further enhanced through the media very often. Unfortunately, often also at the hands of academics themselves, language academies sometimes, that insist that the only Arabic that has legitimacy is a particular type of Arabic, and therefore appoint themselves as guardians of the Arabic language. These are the ones that I call self-appointed guardians of the language. Now, contrary to what the majority of Arabs think, that the written form of Arabic has not changed, in fact, it has changed a lot, and that is why we call the current form of written Arabic, such as the Arabic that is used in journalism and quite nicely also presented in a spoken form on the media. So these news reporters, for instance, speak it with intuition, which probably is the first time that it happens in Arabic, that form of an elevated style of Arabic is being used naturally, is being used in a spoken form. But notice, so this is what the language is doing regardless of the guardians. The language is changing in directions that we linguists would call natural ways of changing. It is coinizing in a sense. But this is not the model that receives legitimacy from language academies, for instance, which is extremely sad. Now, what I think should happen is that language academies themselves should be at the forefront of recording every new change in the language, every new lexeme that enters the language, every new structure that enters the language. I'll give you an example. Years ago, in a meeting of the Language Academy in Jordan, that I happened to attend, someone objected to an expression that at the time was used to write a label next to electricity switches to encourage people to reduce consumption of energy. And it read ترشيد الاستهلاك. And there was an awful lot of objection to this through the Language Academy on the basis that the verb rashada is an intransitive verb in Arabic and shouldn't be used as a transitive verb. So the perspective that an intransitive verb could have changed into a transitive verb sounded like a disaster. In my opinion, this is the wrong attitude. This is the attitude that is likely to lead to the situation that we see, and further to another aspect of behavior that we witness in the Arab world, generally speaking, nowadays, and that is to focus on learning and using a foreign language with your children. That is where the danger is coming from. I am not saying that multilingualism is a danger, quite the opposite. We want to embrace knowledge of as many languages as possible. Learning a new language opens up a whole world. It's a new culture. But the problem lies in the fact that for very many children, Arabic has become a foreign language. And in my opinion, attitudes of this sort towards what Arabic is have a lot to do with it. Arabs, for fear of making mistakes, the fact that the way they speak has no legitimacy, compels them to use a foreign language, at least if you make mistakes in a foreign language, such as what I'm doing now, no one can blame you because it's not your language. But if you make a mistake in standard Arabic, then the situation is different. So back to the issue we were talking about, people's reaction, I think, stems from there.
I think also as translators, our responsibility is to be far more creative and far more courageous with the way that we translate. And like two extreme examples come to mind. Let's take a simple phrase as simple as, can you keep a secret? I kid you not, there are some translators that would go as far as هل لديك للسر موئل. I mean, this sounds like comically bad, you know? And then let's also imagine another scenario that's far more common. Let's imagine a scene in a book where two characters are having a verbal fight. And as the Lebanese say, فاتحين القاموس على بعضهم. They're like cursing each other. How is that translated normally in Arabic? ما هذا الهراء يا صاح تبا لك لا تبا لك أنت اذهب إلى الجحيم عليك اللعنة. I mean, the person who translated that, I mean, have you ever met two Arabs? Have you ever seen two Arabs fighting? Is this how, I mean, we're far more creative in the way we curse at each other. And one very good example comes to mind. There's a Lebanese media platform, Megaphone, that around 6 months ago, they published a translated version of a speech that a student at Rutgers University in the US gave. I mean, that speech was about the lack of solidarity with Palestine, and the student was like, let's say that the speech was crass, and the way Megaphone translated that speech in Lebanese Arabic, I mean, I felt envy. I was like, I want I want to be the person who translated that. And if you go to see the comments, people not only agree with what the student said, and they were like, and your translator deserves a raise, because the speech was translated to Lebanese Arabic, and the curses were translated to Lebanese Arabic, so people were able to, relate to that speech as if it was a Lebanese person in front of them.
I think I would love to start hearing from the audience. I mean, you have 3 people here who love the Arabic language with a fiery passion. I think just to kind of, out of maybe a selfish curiosity, I have to admit, I want to pose a question, and maybe someone here would be able to kind of open a dialogue about it, someone from the audience. So as an alumnus of Northwestern, obviously, I lived in Qatar for quite a while, and it's an Arab country. Its only official language is Arabic, right? But while living here, and even in the past few days of me visiting Qatar again, one barely speaks Arabic, right? Especially in professional contexts. Of course, there is the important factor of the fact that Qatar is a very multicultural country. There are a lot of non-Arabs working in Qatar, correct? But perhaps in a very biased way, I am comparing it to my home country of Saudi Arabia, where the modus is only to speak Arabic, right? So I'm actually very curious, if someone wants to talk about it, to hear what you think about it. This relates really well to Dr. Enam's point about teaching a foreign language as the primary language to your Arab children, right? I want to kind of take that and expand it to maybe Qatar, the UAE, other similar Arab countries. This doesn't only happen abroad. I mean, it does happen nearby, it happens in our surroundings. So I'd love to hear about that if that's possible. And I'd love to hear all your questions as they pertain to publishing, translation, or linguistics. We want really difficult questions, so hit us with all you got.
Okay, I see a couple. We'll do it in this order. 1, 2, 3.
Your request I can talk about for a long time, so I will not say anything right now. We can talk about it later. But I do have a question about the form of Fusha that we write, and why is it that Fusha, the way we are currently experiencing it, that we write it, has those limitations? Like, I love the examples Omar gave. Thank you so much about all of the examples. But particularly, if I pick on the crass examples with the tabban wal la'na ila akhirih, I mean, why isn't it that, like we see in many other languages, language change can also go from the vernacular form into the standard form? It can make that transition. English sees that all the time. Why isn't it that we don't see this? Because there is a view, and this may sound like not like the person who was speaking, in the previous session, me, but there's a view that Fusha nafsha Fusha itself could actually evolve and change in a way to reflect those particular details. Fusha has the ability to be crass in a way, but what, or is it impossible somehow because we put it in such a holy pedestal? So I'm curious, are there any experiments in the translation space of pushing the boundaries on Fusha, like not necessarily going to the vernacular, right? And I respect all the points that you said, and I agree with them, but to kind of play with the Fusha itself. Like, nobody is owning Fusha right now in a way that you talk about Lebanese or somebody talks about their dialect. Who owns the Fusha in a way that allows it to grow and really flourish and be more living than it is?
I just wanted to ask about the untranslatable. Do you think there is such a thing? And does the translated version of an original stand as its own thing altogether? So that's my question for, maybe for you, but for everyone. As for the Khalij and this tension between English as the language of modernization and progression and the future, and Arabic as kind of the language of, okay, culture is nice, we have it at home, we have it in our majalis, but in the professional world, it's all about English. I come to the Khalij, into the Arab world from the US, and as an anthropologist of language and of science, my primary concern is in collecting as much language as I can. So I've been trying to learn the differences, the nuances between the dialects of the Khalij. And so I love, the wajid and wayid and hil and kathir and marra. All of these are different ways to say the word very across different countries in the Khalij. I've found, and this is not so much answering your question as much as maybe complicating it some more. I found that when I push to have a conversation in Arabic, often the person that I'm speaking to, who is in many cases having a bit of a difficulty speaking in English, insisting on speaking in English and responding to me in English when I'm trying to push the conversation into Arabic. So I do see that happening a lot in the Khalij, although I will say, having lived in Saudi and in the Emirates and now in Qatar, that it's interesting to see the spectrum, where in the UAE it's pretty standard to carry on and continue in English. In Saudi, there's a bit more of a sense of, I don't know, some people tend to conflate loyalty to language to a certain sense of lack of modernity. But then I feel like Qatar is somewhere in the middle. But yeah, interested to hear what other people think.
Okay. First point, I agree with Omar that the translator should be honest. He should not interfere with the what he's trying to translate. This is why I call it Arabization more than translation. I remember, and that translator should be, should do his research. I remember when I Arabized a book for R.J. Palacio, 365 Days of Wonder. I had to spend a lot of time to understand exactly what is behind every sentence, because some of them were very old English that you need to understand the context before you interfere and Arabize it. The other point regarding the by Babylon, it is very nice and cute, different, of course, to read something which I can relate to. Like in the eastern part of the Arabic countries, or the countries that speak Arabic, they can easily relate to the Lebanese accent, and they sound cute to read it. Yes, you are reading classic Arabic, or like say the white Arabic, and then suddenly that child will speak in her own language or her own accent, I believe. It's nice, I can relate to, I will be impressed by it, I will like it. But do you think the Algerian or Moroccan will have the same response when he reads or she reads something like that? Can they understand it easily? If I want my work to reach more people, more Arabic-speaking or reading people, shouldn't I take care of them? If Algerian or Moroccan lives in the eastern part of the Arab world, he can understand it because he was interfering, or they were interfering with Lebanese, let's say. What about the Moroccans or Algerians in that part of their countries? So what do you think of that? Thank you.
Okay, let's respond to these.
Nizar, I'll try to answer your question about who owns Fusha, and like is there a space to allow it to include such crass moments. Two examples come to mind. Ibrahim Tuqan and Mudaffar al-Nawab. There are examples in which in their poetry there are, I remember Ibrahim Tuqan was like having a poetry fight with another person called Tawfiq, and the kind of Fusha poetry against this person that he wrote is something that I cannot recite to an audience right now. But I think again this circles back to our responsibility in being far more courageous in using our own language. It's not because Lebanese sounds more relatable that we could Arabize the curse words. Arabic, modern standard Arabic, can accommodate to such expressions, but there's this, sadly, the way we treat Arabic as this very fragile, delicate flower, that cannot accommodate such crass expressions, let's say. And Salma, if I want to get to your question about the untranslatable, I remember while I was translating by Babel with Lamia, there was one part where she was mentioning the flowers that her and her brothers would pick from Al-Ha'li. And the names of these flowers in French, one is about troubles, another reminds them of cemeteries, another about wars. And there I had a moment with Lamia, I'm like, how are we going to translate that to Arabic, and would it be relevant to our readers? She's like, no, we will have to rewrite this passage because the way it translates, it's not relevant to the readers at all. And I think I missed the second part of your question. I mean, I'm not sure there's one answer to this. As I said, the good translators, like, they somehow take authority over the work, because and I remember even when we were like finalizing by Babel, we were discussing like how am I going to be credited, and I remember telling Layan, I don't want the way my name is written to be ترجمة Omar Thawabeh, but I was like, no, I want it to be نقله من الفرنسية Omar Thawabeh, because there is this element of like, yeah, I smuggled this story from French and I gave it to you in Arabic, and now you all think that it was originally written in Arabic. So in many ways, the translated work can be it stands on its own, but that doesn't deny its roots as well.
I just wanted to respond in part to something that Nizar asked. You said who owns Al-Fusha? In my opinion, it is the ownership of all Arabs. Any form of the language ought to be. The Fusha that we call classical Arabic, no one has control over it. If it is to remain in the form that was described to us by the medieval grammarians, it is in that form and no one can touch it, and it can remain a stage in the language for Arabs to fall back on as a stylistic resource. The form of Arabic that should be functionalized is a form, in my dream, of re-standardized Arabic. Arabic needs to be re-standardized in the same way that medieval grammarians put in so much effort for Sibawayh to leave a book of 1,000 pages for us to benefit from the 8th century. We need to do the same thing for future generations. This is only normal. All languages are flexible in this way. They get re-standardized, and if they are re-standardized in line with the developments that have happened in the lives of their speakers, they automatically become the property, if you like. The ownership then is restored rightfully to the native speakers. But I think it is urgent that Arabic should be re-standardized, as simple as that. Yeah. And I think the responsibility falls on language academies. If they want to exist, this is what their job should be. Yeah. Thank you.
I wanted to add a quick point regarding the third question. It's a very subjective answer, but I'm going to answer as a publisher, and what I would do as a publisher if I had a similar book or similar work to Bye Bye Babel written by a Moroccan or Algerian person with, like, let's say, the dialect of Moroccan Arabic, Algerian Arabic, so on and so forth. to be honest, enough with the barrier of, oh, we understand Egyptian Arabic, but we don't understand Moroccan Arabic, or we understand this kind of Arabic and not that kind of Arabic. Enough. Like, I will not further perpetuate that barrier between us and them, quote unquote, between all of the Arab world versus, oh, that Moroccan dialect that we don't understand. I would translate the work in Fusha Arabic, modern standard Arabic, translate the dialogue with a Moroccan translator for Moroccan work, an Algerian translator for an Algerian work, and even if I have to put 10,000 footnotes explaining all the French and Amazighi and all the colloquialisms, it's time. It's time we learn. It's time we understand. Just this morning, we were having a lovely conversation about the origins of certain words like marra in Saudi Arabic, which all Saudis use a lot, like marra halo, right? Or bizzaf. And we sort of dove into like the origins of the word bizzaf, right? That's so interesting. I mean, the distance honestly has become very boring to me. And it's time to take the leap to kind of not only like create a new standard of Arabic, which I agree with that urgency, but to also build that bridge to these cultures or accents that we keep pushing away from us. It's not fair.
And by the way, the dialogues, I mean, I'll take Bye Bye Babel as an example. Yes, the dialogue is in Lebanese, but it's very easy to understand. It's, I mean, even the difficult words we had to like explain them in footnotes. But I think our aversion to vernaculars of Arabic, sadly, is the barrier that maybe stops us from telling good stories, you know, because I mean, and Layan was telling me about this, how like, yeah, the moment some readers see a few words in Lebanese, even if these were words that they completely understand, oh, it's in another dialect, I don't understand that, I don't like that, you know. But I mean, again, back to what we were saying, that all versions of Arabic are Arabic and are valid. Yeah. I mean, we should like stick to that, you know.
A funny comment I would like to add, and maybe we can hear from Dr. Enam after that, is why do they not like to read it in books but like to listen to it in Fairuz, right? Why is it acceptable in music but not in books? What makes the book the revered cultural product? And in some cases it is, but what makes us this like thing that we have to protect? If it's written, it's sacred almost, right? But we all listen to, I mean, we as Arabs, I think I'm going to paint a broad stroke here, but I'm pretty certain of this statement. As a Saudi Arab, I don't exclusively listen to Talal Maddah, you know. An Egyptian Arab would not exclusively listen to Egyptian music. We listen to all these different dialects, so why the rejection?
Well, I think one issue is the spelling conventions. The lack of standardization of ways to write the dialects might stand in the way of fully putting them to work in translation in written forms, which is something that can be done fairly straightforwardly. I would say, if not straightforwardly, it is possible, right, Nizar? Arabic script is amenable to that. And earlier, Nizar and I were talking about the relationship of English spelling to modern English pronunciation. English spelling now, in modern times, reflects how English was in the Middle Ages. Arabic, in fact, is much more straightforward that way. There are a few hiccups that need to be sorted out. So, for instance, the pronoun for he, who, yeah, قلت له, yeah, and قالوا is written the same way, pronounced the same way. What do we do about that? Do we leave it for the context, for the reader to work out from the context, or do we find some way of expressing this difference in the grammatical element. So I think probably if you look at what's happening in the social media, I mean, Arabic is written a lot more now, right? Which is really nice to see in all of its forms, absolutely all of its forms. And I'm very pleased to see that Arabizi has been reduced a lot. So people are much freer to write in Arabic, and you see all of these variations. My guess is that in time, native speakers will agree on the most acceptable form, and that's probably the form that will survive as the convention for spelling something. So in response to the point that you raised, so maybe if they could, if they got used to the standard in the writing of the vernacular,
Definitely.
that might happen.
Okay, let's do a few more questions. I have a question, and then one. Anyone else? 2, 3. Okay, this is my question. From a publishing standpoint, I guess my question is like, where is the demand coming from? Is there an actual demand for these books? Are we solving a moral problem that doesn't have? Are we creating a moral solution to an operational problem that doesn't actually exist? Are there Algerians like demanding for Harry Potter in Algerian, and are demanding for local stories in Algerian written for them to read? Is that an actual demand problem that we're seeing? That's the first question. The second question is related to what you just said, Enam. There is clearly an organic evolution happening, driven largely by social media. The fact that these are texting-based platforms, Twitter, Facebook, WhatsApp, Instagram, and we're allowed to see a proliferation of such text, and so people are giving each other permission. That organic evolution is really exciting. However, I feel as though there is an inorganic amount of funding coming from governmental organizations saying, no, we don't like that script. We like traditional script, and we are going to meet that natural evolution head on. So I'm curious from a publishing standpoint, are you seeing those two things coming to a head? So that's my question to both of you. I saw 1, 2, 3.
Thank you for the insightful and thought-provoking discussion. Okay. I have a few notes and a question at the end to Dr. Enam. The first one is I agree with Omar's analogy of this translator being a smuggler. And I think a great example of that is Paul Bowles' translation of Al-Khubz Al-Hafi by Muhammad Shukri, which was so good because he lived in the same city where he lived and he translated there. So he was able to produce one of the best literary translations. Another note is a statement I heard from a professor who was famous for unhinged and no context statements. And one day he said, you know, Rai music, if you know Rai music, is the music of Algeria. He said Rai music is what saved Arabic in Algeria, and just walked away. So I had to figure it out on my own, and it made sense because, yes, especially because Algeria had one of the worst colonial experiences in the Arab world, and if it wasn't for Rai music, there will not be any use of Arabic in Algeria, and it would be just French everywhere. So yeah, my question is, which is something I noticed recently, when you watch, like, for example, Instagram Reels from like the Maghreb countries, as opposed to ones from the rest of the Arab world, you notice how Moroccans, Algerians, and Tunisians would use what we call Aransiya, which is like Arabic, but it's written in Latin, and using like 3 to replace L'Ain and 7 to replace L'Ha, while the rest of the Arab world doesn't. What could have caused that shift? What's behind it? Thank you.
It was really, really insightful to listen to all of you today. I really enjoyed it. I'm someone that graduated from Georgetown, Qatar. Although my interest was in politics, I found my passion in linguistics, and now I've been working in the education field for 10 years. Fortunately, it's amazing to be working in education, but one of the sad truths that we come across is that so many of our Arab children feel freer and more like themselves when they're expressing themselves in a foreign language. Of course, this goes back to the language being, restrictive in the sense that Fusha Arabic is very difficult. As someone that's learned it, unfortunately, as a second language, despite being Qatari, I can attest to that. But another reason is also because maybe there's a sense that when you speak in a foreign language, you have I don't know, it comes with that culture, and so there's that sense of freedom. But I'm interested to know your thoughts on how vernacular Arabic can be supported, promoted, and legitimized in the context of education. So when we're teaching Arabic to children now, one of the biggest struggles is actually getting the buy-in from them to want to learn it, to take it as seriously as their English lessons. If we were to add different vernaculars to that, wouldn't that, create some advantage for some students over others? If we were to legitimize certain vernaculars of Arabic and not others, wouldn't that create even more complexity when we're already struggling with teaching them standard Arabic to begin with? And then my other question about publishing in particular, I wonder what your thoughts are on censorship in the Arab world. And I know, I don't want to open a can of worms, but I guess it goes back to the bigger issue with language, in the sense that we care to read and learn and to engage with the content and media around us when we feel it represents us and we can relate to it. We see parts of ourselves in it. That doesn't happen when the language is so polished and watered down, and you take this and that, this is too fragile, this is too much. So what are your thoughts on that? That's it.
Maybe let's stop there, just because there was a lot there, and then we can come back.
The Qatari accent is very lively, I think. When I first moved, I had to learn a few words, like helagi, for example. I love learning that word. And so many other words, right? I mean, imagine if we had a plethora of children's books written in the Qatari vernacular. Wouldn't that begin to solve the problem, right? For kids to read these books the way their parents speak, I think that's a good beginning. In terms of censorship, I would say it differs from country to country, and that's what makes distribution in the Arab world challenging, which then ties into Mikey's question. But how we deal with issues of censorship, I mean, there are obvious do's and don'ts that apply to the majority of the Arab world. Work smart around them, right? For me, I care more about the very delicate balance of cultural sensitivity versus introducing new content to Arabic readers. And my particular focus is on Gulf readers by sheer virtue of our location and where I'm from. Some people would rather really push the boundary. I prefer an approach that's mawzoon, balanced, which is also the name of our publishing house. And I am of the belief that it's actually more difficult to try to achieve that balance of how far can we push the new idea now versus how much do we have to maintain the cultural sensitivity. And it differs with each book, it differs with each subject matter, but I think the most important thing is to be sensitive yet courageous, right? That's my answer to censorship. And circling back to the question about demand, there's so much that's wrong with the Arab publishing industry. I'm just going to say that very straightforwardly because there's no other way to say it. For example, the mere fact that our book fairs operate B2C, 53% of all book sales from this traveling circus, I enjoy this traveling circus, book fairs are fun, but 53%, if this is not an indicator of an extreme lack of bookstore infrastructure, I don't know what is. That's awful. Where are the spaces for readers? I remember back in Qatar when I lived here, that was long before this new building of the university and long before QNL. I left before QNL was launched, but I couldn't wait. There was no proper readership infrastructure, right? And that's a rarity not only back then in Qatar, but I would argue in most of the Arab world. Where are those spaces, those events that foster the sustainable, continuous purchasing of books, interacting with books, reading, right? Accessible libraries that don't come with hefty fees, libraries that are open to all, librarians who are able to bridge the gap between readers and the books. So there's so much to talk about from that aspect. There's another aspect, the lack of literary agents. And I think this might be an extremely exciting career option for many people. There are none or barely any, basically, in the Arab world. How do we bridge the gap between the author and the publishing house? Authors often have to advocate for themselves. I mean, writing a book takes a year minimum, right? If it's a good book, if it's a bad book, it might take a month. But you need that person, the middle man or woman, the literary agent who's present in all other publishing industries of the world, whether it be the West or Japan or Korea. I mean, we can go all across the globe and find them. The literary agent advocates for the author's rights, tells them, no, this is a bad deal, go for the other publishing house, right? Which in turn creates the third problem on our list. There's a long list. But the third problem on our list is some publishing houses, although they don't advertise it, and these are prominent publishing houses, operate on the vanity publishing model, which is essentially the pay-to-publish model. I could have an awful book, but a lot of money. Omar could have an amazing book, no money. Guess who they'll choose? Me. And these publishing houses, although they don't shape the entirety, they do shape a significant portion of the Arabic publishing scene. They'll easily take 20K, 30K, sometimes 50K Qatari riyals from the author, who's often, I mean, in some cases, penniless, or depending on this book to, make it big so that they break bank. They should have the capacity to make writing their living, bread-winning profession, but they don't. The infrastructure is not there. The subsequent problem is the lack of proper distribution infrastructure. I could count the companies in the entirety of the Arab world that work with distributing books. Usually distributors, we work with a lot of distributors in Europe, in America, we have our books in Australia. I'm very proud of that fact. Because of the many numerous options of distributors in these countries, they would fight over you as the publisher, right? So then as a publisher, I get to choose between the top 2-3 distributors who gave me the best deal, and then I go forth with them. It's the inverse in the Arab world. So because there are so few of them, I approach them, and I'm relatively small compared to the giants in the field, and they're like, no, we're too busy, right? So that would be another business idea or a job idea for someone in the room, perhaps, or your cousin or your sibling, because we're in dire need of that. And if they do become a literary agent, a book distributor, courageously, innovatively, I bet you there will be a huge change in the publishing scene. So then coming back to the specifics of Mikey's question about, is there truly a need for a book with Algerian dialogue? Is there truly a need for a book with Lebanese dialogue? I'm going to be sassy for a second, and I'm going to say, I don't know, and I don't care, because right now the gap is so huge that my only focus is to create fantastic books, and I'm going to own it and say truly our books are fantastic, they're incomparable. Every book fair we go to, comment on the quality of translations that we work on. Guess what? Because we pay the people, right, that we work with, we make sure that they're properly credited, all these important factors. We print the book rather expensively, right, to ensure that it's good quality, to ensure that the book lasts. Unfortunately, not many do that, right? And it's very hard to maintain that kind of business that then empowers the book to be something like a not just something that you buy and then throw away after a few years when you're doing your spring cleaning, but an object that is worthy of admiration. And I think that is necessary in the specific context of the Arabic language. Because we see so many people thinking of Arabic as uncool, right? We need to create these books with exciting topics, exciting printing, exciting partnerships, exciting finish, right? To have it as an object that is to be admired, revered, so that finally there's this at least 2 steps or 3 steps forward in bridging the gap to make Arabic, let's say, more cool, more high quality, more accessible. I hope that was short and sweet.
Do you need reminders?
Mikey, don't you think that the availability of books might encourage more readers to engage in reading?
Is that rhetorical?
Right. Kind of, yeah. Now, I wanted to clarify a point so that it is clear what we mean by incorporating, at least from my perspective, incorporating the vernacular in the written norm of the language. Every language needs a standard. And I mean, this is how discussions of this sort are usually reported by those who want to twist arguments. That these people are calling for the abolishing of standard Arabic and adopting each vernacular as a standard. There is a happy medium which I think should be the subject of discussion amongst academics and as well as various stakeholders and perhaps decision makers. It isn't that. Standardization and having a standard is important. Every language has a standard. It is important for from an educational perspective. It is important from a communication perspective, and also it addresses this issue that we are often faced with, that were Arabs to make any changes to the status quo, they won't be able to talk to each other. No one, at least I am not saying that at all. All that is needed for Arabic is a much more liberal, I hate using that word, because, but in this context, this is what I mean. An open mind on what language is. Language is there to serve us, and it therefore should reflect our communicative needs, should accommodate our communicative needs. Now, standard Arabic itself, as it is used in the media nowadays, in the printing press even, is variable, is not uniform across the Arab world. I had a PhD student who worked on that. There are considerable differences, not only in lexemes, but also grammatical differences. And that has not stopped Arabs from being able to communicate with each other. And if we look at a language like English that has multiple standards, standard British English, and even within the UK, there are variations to standard English, and standard American English and standard Southern Hemisphere Englishes type of thing, and now there are new types of Englishes. That does not stop native speakers of English from communicating with each other. Something similar can happen to Arabic. Incorporate, of course, the situation of Arabic is different because it is what we call a diaglossic language, مزدوجة لغويا. The standard classical Arabic is a norm that no one speaks natively, and I would not want to advocate or for any steps to disparage or sideline standard Arabic as a norm of the language that Arabs are attached to psychologically, emotionally, sentimentally. But there are different levels to this norm, to this standard norm. There is a level that is no longer relevant, and it can remain there as a very important resource for those who are interested, for specialists. There is a form of Arabic that is equally valid, and it has imposed itself in Arabic-speaking societies, and this is the norm that we hear on television and that we see modern contemporary writers use. What is the problem with the language that Nizar Qabbani used? What is the problem with re-standardizing Arabic in accordance with these contemporary writers? This is a form of Arabic that has respect, that has prestige. It can function exactly in the same way. I mean, if we think of a unifying factor, there is no problem with that. Now, when it comes to incorporating the vernaculars, we don't have to think of Lebanese, Syrian, Jordanian, Saudi, Qatari. The fact is that if you look at regional variation that I mentioned earlier in Arabic vernaculars, there are regional standards. There is such a thing. This is reality. There is such a thing as Lahjat al-Mashriqiyya. There is such a thing as Levantine dialects. And the evidence for this is that someone from Morocco won't be able to tell the difference between my dialect, funnily enough, and that of Amanda's. To us, to people from the region, the differences are obvious. To outsiders, they're not obvious. But this is very important. What this means is that there is such a thing as a norm that is associated with that region. So these are real. So when we talk, there is a Gulf-wide dialect. There is such a thing. There is Peninsula Arabic. There is Levantine Arabic. There is the Nile Valley Arabic. There is North African Arabic. Egypt is a bridge between the East and the West. Libya is on the Libya itself has two major regions. So incorporating features from these regional varieties isn't going to be that foreign to the Arab ear, really, I don't think. Well, at least we can discuss this. We can talk about it. The mechanics of how this can be done and what can be done is a question for specialists. What is Nizar doing there? That's what he should be doing, for instance.
شو عم تعمل بحياتك؟ يلا عجل. Omar, why don't you take us away? Because we got to wrap up.
Okay, the story that I'm about to tell is like a translation story with a happy ending. It doesn't involve publishing, but it's about dubbing. So the first Disney animated film that was dubbed into Arabic was Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, and the dubbing happened in 1975. The Queen was played by two voice actresses. The Queen was played by Mervat Saeed, and the Witch was played by Malak al-Gamal. What was a brilliant choice by the people who worked on the Arabic version is that the Queen, in her normal form, she spoke in Fusha. She had this regal speech, and her Arabic was like very poetic. But then when she transforms into a witch and she becomes scary and she keeps breaking the fourth wall and she like starts cackling, that's all in Egyptian. And that for me, I think, was fascinating. And if you remember, around 10 years ago, many Disney movies were purchased by Al Jazeera, and there was this choice to redub all of these films into Fusha, and the redubbings were absolutely horrendous. Snow White, for instance, and there's a lot of censorship involved in this, is that, for instance, the scene where the Queen takes the potion and turns into a witch, this scene is completely cut out. And of course, the mention of love's first kiss, قبلة حبيب فؤاد, this is completely gone. And I remember there was a campaign, a very courageous campaign that was Disney لازم ترجع بالمصري. And guess who led that campaign? A Qatari. And it succeeded. So I'll leave you with that.
All right. Please give it up for our amazing panel. Again, if you weren't here earlier, I mentioned that we will put an article out on Daftar, Afikra's magazine, online with information about all the panelists, where you can find their work, where you can find all their different platforms that they're involved with. It's been fantastic having you all here. We are going to wrap up today. As I said earlier, this episode is going to be published on our podcast and on our YouTube. So if you're not subscribed already, you should be. But let's give it up another time for this amazing panel.